It's Local Edition. Brad Pomerance here in Sacramento, joined by Jay Obernolte. He is a member of the California State Assembly. He is the Vice Chair of Budget. And I always love when the governor comes out with his budget, because the Democratic governor tends to get plaudits from the Republicans, and the Democrats feel as if, oh, he's not spending enough. And so, some say that Jerry Brown's the best Republican governor we've had in a long time. What do you make of that, sir?
Well, from a budgetary standpoint, I think it's accurate. Other standpoints, I don't think it's accurate to say that.
I do want to talk more about the budget, though, because it seems as if the governor, year in and year out, is at a certain level criticized for being too conservative in his estimates. What do you make of that?
Well, I think he is reacting to the situation that the state finds itself in.
Right.
So we've got declining tax revenues, and what's declining is not the absolute value of the revenue, but the rate of growth of the revenue is declining.
Okay.
So we're having to go back into previous years and restate the revenues because we're getting less than we expected
Right.
to. So in that kind of environment, he is signaling to the entire legislature that we should be cautious.
Because we see that a chief legislative analyst comes out with reports that suggest that the revenue estimates are higher, or should be seen as higher than what the governor's estimates are.
Yeah, and I think that that's the central narrative of the budget discussion this year, will be this disagreement between the Department of Finance, with a relatively conservative
Right.
revenue estimate, and the Legislative Analyst's Office, which would like to have the revenue estimates be higher. And the reason why the legislature cares about that is because the more revenue we get, the more they
Right.
can spend.
So I know that you've made great friends and alliances with Democrats to be relevant, I guess you could say. This year's unique, though. The Democrats control 2/3 of the Assembly and the Senate. So technically speaking, they could do whatever they want without Republican votes. I would presume that you're still working with your friends on the Democratic side.
Oh, of course.
And so what do you hope to do through this budgetary process? Because, you want to be important.
Well, I mean, it's less about wanting importance.
But you know what
and
I'm
more
saying, you want to be relevant.
Well, we want to make sure that the state's on a sustainable financial path. And if you look at what has occurred the last few years, the rate of growth of state spending has been on an unsustainable path. So 2 years ago, state spending grew at 7%. Last year, 6%. And this year, it's 5%, if you include the special funds, which is an important
Right.
part. It's almost half of the state spending.
Another area which I think is one of tremendous concern for all parties is what monies will or will not come from Washington. Because you know better than I that California receives a huge amount of money from the federal government. And if the federal government, with a new administration, is looking to change the way they hand out money to the states, that could play a very significant role in how much we have to spend in the final analysis.
Yeah, I think you're right. But, I mean, there's opportunity there, too. So California is one of only 11 states that is a net tax donor to the federal government. In other words, we pay more money in taxes than we get back in tax benefits. And the incoming administration has stated that one of their top priorities is an increased investment in infrastructure throughout all 50 states. So we have incredibly compelling infrastructure needs in California, as you know. We've roads and highway maintenance and our water infrastructure. So we have a compelling case to make to the new administration that we deserve to get that money back here in California.
So the question becomes, we do know the new administration is looking, at least as stated during the campaign, to spend money on projects. Prior administrations would have required some type of state match, or we don't know if that's what's going to be required with this new administration. But I guess the bottom line is, are we ready if the money starts to flow?
Well, we certainly have many shovel-ready projects that we can suggest, but I think that it also means that we need to have a good relationship with the incoming administration. And so starting off on an adversarial foot's not the right thing to do.
Let's talk about that. I think that's a very valid point. Before the new president came in, the day after the new president was elected, we saw resolutions coming out of the Assembly and the Senate, I guess you could say bashing the incoming president. We saw the retention of Eric Holder, the former Attorney General, put him on retainer in case we need to sue the federal government. Javier Becerra came home to be the new Attorney General. I'm not casting aspersions on any of these people. California seems like it's lining itself up to be Texas.
Right.
Vis-a-vis Obama, California will be vis-a-vis Trump. Right move?
I don't think so.
Explain.
Well, I mean, just for the discussion we were just having, well, there are benefits of having good relationship with the federal government.
Right.
And California can make a compelling argument that we deserve more of an investment from the feds here in the state. But most importantly, I think most of the actions that the state has taken so far have been premature because we have no idea what the official position of the administration is going to be, specifically towards the state of California. And I think wisdom would suggest that we should wait and see if that relationship is going to be adversarial before assuming that it's going to be an adversarial
And
one.
look, arguably the number 2 member of the House of Representatives is a Californian,
Right.
Kevin McCarthy. So there's no reason why California can't play in the new administration. We have advocates and allies there.
Yes, and the congressman, as you know, has reached out and offered to be a liaison between the state and the incoming administration.
I want to talk about this past year, sir. And it was a brutal year in terms of our law enforcement officials. It's hard to even discuss without becoming emotional when you think about what happened in Des Moines, Iowa, Dallas, Texas, Baton Rouge, Louisiana. You had individuals lying in wait, specifically to harm and kill police officers.
Yes.
Devastating, just devastating. What can we do as a state to try to thwart those actions?
Well, I have been very alarmed at the increase in ambush-style attacks on police officers. And the most egregious of those is when someone is targeting the officers merely because they are wearing the uniform. Because this is a class of people who is dedicated by profession to protecting the populace. And so whatever we can do to protect them, I think we need to do.
So I think the key distinction you're making, and it's an important one, is that you're looking to increase penalties, actually classify the targeting of a police officer as a hate crime. But not if an officer, look, all murder is horrendous, but not if an officer happens to be killed in the perpetrating a burglary. It's when they're targeted for their status.
Yes, exactly.
Explain.
Well, so last month I introduced AB 2, which would, as you say, classify attacks on police officers as hate crimes. But in order to prove hate crime status, you have to prove that that group was targeted. So, for example, injury to a police officer committed in the course of committing a crime, well, deplorable, it would not be a hate crime. Something resisting arrest is not a hate crime. There are already existing penalties that do that. But a hate crime is when, as occurred in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, as occurred in Dallas, Texas, is when someone goes out and says, you know what, I'm going to go hurt a police officer. And that's not right.
Do you know if any other states have adopted similar legislation?
Yes. Last year there was a bill in Louisiana that was signed by the governor, and so it is now current state law, which adds status as a peace officer to their hate crime statute, and that is what I modeled my AB 2 after.
I wonder if some of your friends on the Democratic side might sign on because, you know, arguably if it can be a bipartisan bill, more likely the governor would put his signature on it, no?
I think you're right, and I am very optimistic that they will. I mean, because protection of peace officers is not a partisan issue. I think we're all unified in our desire to make California as safe as we can. And we're talking about a really alarming trend. I mean, if you look at the number of peace officers that were killed across the country, it was 16 last year. That was a 300% increase versus the year before. We need to send a clear message that we're not going to tolerate this kind of behavior.
His name is Jay Obernolte. He is a member of the California State Assembly representing significant portions of the Inland Empire and the beautiful, is it the Big Bear Mountains?
San Bernardino and San Gabriel.
There you have it. I'm Brad Pomerance in Sacramento, local edition.